This is 152, and we're down to network evidence. So, monitoring the network is real important. Like, I have another class just about Splunk network monitoring. It's now necessary. This is all part when in 2010, when the Chinese hacked Google, there was a shockwave through the information security community, and I went to a conference after that, and they asked all the major vendors, RSA and all these other vendors, say, we paid millions of dollars to you for these products called, edge computing products to sit on the edge of our network, and the Chinese just blast through it like it's not there. What's wrong with this picture? And they had nothing. The vendors had no solution at all. They said, we promise in the 6 months we're going to have an AI-driven network firewall that will have no signatures, detect those things, and stop them on the wire. And that was garbage. They still don't have that 14 years later. But this is what happens when your technical team has got nothing, so the sales team just makes up science fiction. But then people came up with what the plan is, and the plan I thought was insane at that time. You're going to have your firewalls and your antivirus, and then you're going to have a network monitoring team monitoring the network to find the stuff that gets through, and then you're going to have an instant response team to clean up the stuff that gets through. And this sounded insanely difficult and expensive, and I thought that would never happen, but that has gradually happened, and that's why this course is here. That is now what you do. It was unthinkable 14 years ago. That sounded impossible, expensive, hopeless. That's where we are. So you monitor your network to find out if security incidents are real, accumulate evidence, and then you engage in instant response. You find out how big the compromise is and generate a timeline. These are all things you can get from the network. So monitoring your network, there's 4 basic ways to do it. One is to run an intrusion detection system that will trigger events when it recognizes bad things, like suricata. That's the equivalent of antivirus, and that's one way. Another thing is complete packet captures, where you store all the data. Now that way you have everything, but like a whole disk image, it's a lot of data, a lot of junk to wade through, hard to store, hard to maintain. Session information is much more common. This is what Cisco created, called, we'll come up across the name of it later. It's been around for a really long time, and the original plan of this came from the telephone network. All you wanted to know is what phone number called what other, at what time, and for how many minutes, so we can put it in the bill. That was the pen register, and you keep similar session information, just who's been talking to what, without recording the whole packets. And then you can have other high-level statistics, like what DNS queries are on the network or something like that. The event-based alerts come from a product that can recognize significant events like suricata or NetWitness. It's got to have a rule set to detect things. Snort can do this. It does have the ability to do real-time monitoring and real-time alerting, although I've never used that. It seems like an unnecessarily heavy, expensive product to do that, but these other tools do that. And so full packet captures, we've talked about this, the easiest one. All the traffic on the network is saved, and therefore you have everything. If anybody downloads a file, you can reconstruct the file. Everything everybody's doing. It's just that it's the most expensive, most complete response. Session information is just logging headers. So you're getting what IP address talked to what IP address at what time, and if somebody transfers a file, you can see they connected to this server with file transfer protocol, and we're on there and sent like 1,000 packets, but you don't have the packets, so you can't reconstruct the file. You just know the general outline of what happened. And then the high-level statistics showing something like different protocols, number of packets, general things. So you might be able to detect suspicious patterns, but it's like a log file. You're just getting a quick summary of what happened. So the event-based is the most common type, of course, just like people like antivirus, they like intrusion detection. And remember, I heard people say when this first came out like 25 years ago, when they came up with Snort, they said, that's it, we've solved security. We'll just stop all the attacks on the wire, everything will be fixed. There have been many times when people thought we solved it. Now I think we pretty much wised up. That's why one thing, if you look at any ad and they say this thing is unhackable or it's perfect security, don't buy it because they're idiots. Nothing is unhackable, nothing is perfect security. Like, nothing is 100% up. Something bad could happen no matter what you have. So realistically, your product lowers the risk of something, but nothing lowers the risk to zero, just like there's no pill that will cure all your ills. So anyway, it's got rules. It's looking to see if it detects a recognized pattern like Snort or suricata, our tools, and then it will send an alert of some kind, or perhaps even connect to a firewall and open a firewall rule to block that traffic. So you look for indicators. You might have a simple indicator like just an IP address or a port, That's cheap, very easy for the sensor to do. Or you might have something complicated where it has to look for a certain pattern of bytes in the traffic, and that's more expensive. It'll take more processor on the sensor, so you can easily burden your sensor so it can't keep up with the traffic. So there's a skill involved in determining rules that are cheap enough to be effective, cheap enough to be practical, and still accurate enough to be effective. There's a snort rule that has this crazy layout of snort rules. This is the standard. So this is an alert on TCP. These are what networks it applies to. Anything on the external network to my home network on port 22. Here's the message, SSH brute force login. So it's going to look for an established flow, which means SYN/SYNAC has happened on SSH protocol. Then it's going to count 5 events in 60 seconds, matching this activity, and then it'll call that 5 failed login attempts. So this is a relatively simple snort rule. And so there's something called alert fast you can put in there, and that puts the output in a file so you can easily see it. And it can get incredibly complicated incredibly fast. This is the one that detects a fake SSL certificate. So it's going to look for this pattern of bytes, 7CA274D0, which is something like the signature of that certificate in the traffic, and then this pattern somewhere, and here's this AOL address, and so on. So you just look for all these things in the packets, and it can get pretty complicated, but that's what it does. There's more snort rules to do things. So, all right, that's one way to go. Then you can do header or full packet logging. Then you can get signatures, monitor activities, you can identify stolen data, you can collect evidence for a legal issue. Like you'd always want the full hard drive and whole RAM capture if you're going to take it to court. You can say, well, we took all the evidence. And this full packet capture is all the network evidence as viewed from one point, which is another big issue. Where do you sniff? If you sniff on the gateway to the internet, you get the internet traffic, but you do not get point-to-point traffic inside your network. And your network often has more than one way out. And your network can have multiple segments. You can even have multipath TCP, where when you connect, it connects out both gateways at once. And if you don't record them both and then correlate them, you don't get any full streams. So actually, if there's a hard drive, you can get the whole hard drive from one point. But if you want all the network traffic, you have to define what you mean more carefully, because there's no one place where all the network traffic flows through. So that's another issue. But anyway, you may have to have your PCAP add it to a file and keep a chain of custody to take it to court. All right, so the IDS systems can retain the full session, but for targeted collection, use TCP dump or Wireshark. And as I mentioned before, don't use Wireshark to monitor live network traffic. It is not safe enough. Wireshark has a whole bunch of protocol dissectors to let you examine all the details of every protocol, and those are just written by the community. So a lot of them have defects, security defects. So you can take over a machine through Wireshark. So you should not be using Wireshark as for routine monitoring of network traffic. You use it to analyze a PCAP that you got with TCP dump. Also, Wireshark will just fill up the RAM and crash. It's not really intended to be like something you turn on and monitor the network traffic continuously. TCP dump is. So here's what a complete capture in TCP dump looks like of an HTTP request. First, you get a header showing the input IP and port and the output IP and port. And by the way, if you don't turn it off, it will change the input address into a descriptive name. It'll change the output port into a descriptive name. I always turn this junk off at -n. I want to see numbers. But it'll try to turn numbers into alphabet one way or another. Then you see the flags. This is push, ACK, and here's sequence numbers. And then down here you have the raw packet, the hexadecimal of the packet, and here's what it looks like. A bunch of IP addresses and port numbers and stuff, and then a get HTTP, and here's the start of it. So you can capture as much as you want, but typically what you do is you limit to 64 bytes. That way you get only the header and not the contents of the packet, so you wouldn't get this stuff down here, like the full GET request. You just get the IP addresses, and you know only what was talking to who at what time, but not all the contents of the data, just to make it smaller. NetFlow, that's what the name I was looking for earlier. Cisco invented this NetFlow, and the point of this was you could take a high bandwidth item like a T1, which it all started maybe 20 years ago. You would then split it up into multiples of 56K. You would then lease that out as an ISP, and people would pay for 2 or 3 times 56K, and you would monitor the traffic, see how much they've used. and then charge them for it or limit them to only so much bandwidth. That's the point of it. That's why it's analogous to what the telephone company keeps. So NetFlow goes in here and it just records source and destination, IP address and port, protocol, and then how many packets. So they can choose how much bandwidth you used and then bill you for it or something. That was the idea. So this is the equivalent of a pen register in a telephone network. And then statistical monitoring. There's a lot of devices out there that will monitor something and give you like a graph of your network output. Flow tools and Argus are a couple tools that do this. They'll take a PCAP and turn it into this thing called Argus format, so you can then give these Argus commands to graph them and create graphics like this. How many bits per second? And you see there's a spike in traffic there, so something big happened. And here's another log output. So this is 100 times higher than that. And you do it this way to make it easier to spot widely varying heights. So that's flow traffic. Let's try a Kahoot. And it is here. And here. Good. You can tell they're amateurs because of that long delay. I used to write scripts this way. I don't know how long it's going to take, so I just give it like a 5-second delay. A pro would watch for the end, but you know, when you don't know what you're doing, like I often don't, you do sleazy things like just wait a few seconds. 152.9a. I think using sleep is the mark of a poor programmer. I mean, that's the stupidest way to wait for something to happen. You can't think of a better way, you're not in good control. I just learned what API bombing is, I think they call it. It's a way to delay. Because I used to do this. If you sleep for like 5 seconds, your malware will not be detected by antivirus solutions. Because they run it in a virtual machine and wait a second, they can't wait any longer. So I did that, but they're all watch for sleep. So what you do is you make an API call, and then you do like 10,000 of them to use up time. Just to wait, just to be innocent, and wait until it gets tired of looking, then you do the bad thing. Because it would slow everything down if they watched them on it, stuff for 5 seconds, waiting for it to be bad. Was in a malware report this week. They had 2 things I'd never heard of in there. And that one I was able to look up. The other one I could never find any explanation of. I think, unfortunately, Joe Online Sandbox names this technique with some screwy name that nobody else uses. So that's a huge problem in this industry is non-uniformity. Like now, and I don't know why everybody keeps renaming the threat groups. I seriously read reports and it says the threat group, which Microsoft now calls Midnight Lightning, is equal to Nobelium, is equal to APT31, is equal to this, like 8 different names for the same group. We need like a CVE number for these groups. This is the step 1 of science, is just classifying things. Animal, vegetable, mineral. First thing you do is try to figure anything out is you classify it into categories. Then you agree. Then you can analyze it more. But we haven't even got that in threat actors. It's like they do. Well, I think the problem is you're not really sure. But every company just makes up their own names, which is screwy. I don't know why they do that. It's like they're going to trademark them and sell caps or something. And Microsoft keeps using normal names. Like before they used metals like strontium, and you Google, you can't find it. So now they're using 2 words for weather, whereas other people use something. It's weird. We really need like a CVE number. Just official registry, one place with some identifier for these groups. I thought the Mandiant APT system was pretty good, but they seem to have abandoned it. Anyway, all right, so which monitoring will let you reconstruct a file from FTP transfer? You got to have the whole packet to do that. And by the way, even that usually won't do it anymore now that everything is encrypted. But anyway, all right. So what does NetFlow do? High-level statistics, a summary of each flow. This person connected to that person, sent 1,000 packets. All right. All right, how about snort? Yeah, it monitors the network and it releases events. I detected this virus, I detected that virus, that sort of thing. That type of attack. All right, and how about TCP dump? Yeah, full packets. Now, you could also get the headers only. That's why I took it off. You can configure it through full packets or headers. All right. All right, the people with funny names know they got to come out of the closet if they want their points. But a lot of people don't care about points, which is fine. All right, so you got to set up a network monitoring system. And the simplest way is to add hardware devices, network taps that you buy, and you just plug in the data. So all the data flows through there, and you can extra copy of it all. Then you attach software like Snort or TCP dump or something to it. That's fast and easy. And you can even carry around a laptop that's fast and connected if you want to make a temporary one. Now, IDS platforms can usually not do network surveillance and intrusion detection at the same time. If you're going to capture full content, it will be busy, and its capacity to filter traffic will be diminished. So it's an issue, keeping up with fast traffic. By the way, let me check for comments online. There are none. Okay. Anyway, so define your goals, make sure you have legal standing, get your hardware and software, and secure it. Many businesses have insecure equipment closets. I used to work for a financial company that was in an old bank, and they had us moving in the side door, and the first room was the server room with the server there and the keyboard, and everybody had to walk past it every day in and out. Nothing was locked up at all. You don't want to do that. It should be locked up so you know who's going in the server room and the equipment closet where the wires are. Those are important places that not just every idiot should be wandering in unmonitored. You should have a record of who goes in there, like video surveillance, because that's the heart of the system. Anyway, so place it at a good place, like I said, where it's going to catch the traffic you care about, which can be pretty complicated, and then evaluate the data, check and make sure it's working. Devices, this is that same company, actually. We went to get backups, and it turned out that they had given the backup to the idiot that was smoking dope out in the parking lot every day, and he had never changed the tape in like 3 months. They were supposed to be changing, so we didn't have any backups. You got to check these things. You got to check your backup and make sure it's working. Things you don't actually use, you often don't think about checking. So, whatever you got, test it. Make sure it's actually working. Anyway, so it's hard to store every packet, so you need powerful servers to do this. FreeBSD has been the standard for firewalls and network appliances for years, but lately Linux is even faster. They've improved the kernel to handle traffic so it can handle the most traffic. And there's a special kind of network socket you put in your kernel to catch the most traffic. So if you plan ahead, you you put a commercial network monitoring device in with storage and all that. If you pay for it, people will gladly sell you this stuff. They're open source alternatives, but a lot of companies prefer the commercial stuff. Cisco will sell you stuff. Trend Micro will sell you stuff. There's plenty of people selling you a network monitoring device. Security Onion is the free Linux distribution just for this. I used to use it in my CNIT 50 class, and it really, really was awful. It was badly out of date. Half the tools didn't work. It had tools so old that they expected you to view it in a browser with Flash. And I'd have a room full of students using exactly the same version, and half of it would work and half of it wouldn't. It made me cry. And then Splunk, I found out about Splunk, and I said, well, forget this garbage. We're going to learn Splunk. However, Security Onion does have a loyal community, and they've been improving it, and they say it's gotten better, and it might have. I just don't care. Learning Splunk is what you want to say. And basically, all the rest of these things are a cheap imitation of Splunk. And a lot of my students on the job are, in fact, using these other things, like there's another one, I may remember, Logarithm. Logarithm is another one. There's a bunch of tools that are cheaper and almost as good as Splunk. Just like there's OpenOffice that's almost as good as Microsoft Office but cheaper. So that's what a lot of people use, but you might as well learn on Splunk. And if you go to a company that'll pay you well, they'll pay for Splunk too, because then they don't want to waste all the time of their employees. So anyway, it's the standard. Except now QRadar is competing with it. Now what QRadar needs to do is have some kind of free learning platform. Right now you have to pay $1 million for it, and I don't happen to have that, so I'm not teaching QRadar. I'd gladly teach it if they would give me some kind of free version to give my students. That would be awesome. Anyway, they ought to have an online server we can share or something. Anyway, they forgot to ask me for my opinion. So, all right, so you got to figure out where does traffic go out of your network? See how it controls the traffic. Are there choke points at administrative boundaries? If you want to have like a high security region, like your finance separated from like sales, does all the traffic between those two really pass through one router? And can you secure it there? Or are there multiple paths? You got to think about it. This is why, for example, America does not block or filter the internet. We can't. Countries that want to do that, like China, have to force all internet traffic to go through one ISP, which they control. There have been people that wanted to do it, like Obama. Obama wanted to have a kill switch for the internet. This is one of his many extremely unwise, controversial ideas he brought up, usually which he retreated from in a hurry after he found out how badly they flew. Like he wanted to have the government control your passwords. So you don't have the government will be the official login. Everybody will log in with the government, and we'll handle all your passwords. And that one he abandoned in like 2 days when he saw the freak out. The kill switch lasted for like 2 weeks before he abandoned it. But anyway, that was his plan. We should be able to turn off the internet in case of like people are getting disinformation on the internet about elections or something all important like that, which is not an entirely bad idea. But the fact is, you can't do it in America because there's 100 different ISPs, all these different ways to go out. And you would have to restructure the whole system where all those ISPs are under the control of the government. You can order them all, and they have to obey you. It would pretty much have to become a fascist state to do that. But in other countries, they have that. And all traffic goes through one point, so they can just limit it. All right, and of course, if you let anybody use encapsulating protocols like VPNs, then even if the traffic is going through your choke point, you can't filter it because you can't see it. So you have to block all end-to-end encryption. This is what happened to United Arab Emirates. United Arab Emirates has a law that they have to filter all the traffic to block things they don't like insulting Muhammad and pornography and stuff. And therefore, when BlackBerry wanted to go in there, BlackBerry is a Canadian company, I think, and they had encrypted phones. And the phones could browse the internet, and the traffic was end-to-end encrypted to Canada. And the United Arab Emirates said, that's not legal. You have to put an endpoint in the country that will decrypt it so we can inspect the traffic before it goes back. And they did that. And this is what Microsoft has done with China. China absolutely demands you can't have a unfiltered search engine. If you have a search engine, it has to block things the government doesn't like. And Google refused to do that and left. Most companies left. Microsoft agreed. So Bing is the search engine used in China, and they filter Bing to match Chinese rules. And people argue with them, saying they're immoral to do that. And Microsoft says, well, they have much inferior search if they didn't have us. So you can argue. We're obeying the local law. But anyway, that's the issue. And therefore, you can't allow any encrypted tunnels through. So, and also consider things like network address translation and web proxies. This will affect your identifying IP addresses and identifying what devices are being used. So, as you change things, it may have things to do with your with your network filtering. For example, if you have multiple separate ISP for each office, you might want to move everything to a central point. I've consulted for companies where every single person has to use a company laptop, and it has to go through the VPN concentrator at the main office, so the internet is really slow and buggy all the time. You can't do anything without going through the VPN at their main office, which is not powerful enough. So it's an issue. Anyway, all right, so put your sensor in a locked room, of course, keep it up to date and patched, document everything, and ensure the integrity of the OS. I've been having lots of arguments with this on Paul's Security Weekly. Tripwire is a really great, really old solution from like 30 years ago. I even independently invented it. It was simple. When I first taught hacking, I taught students to deploy a rootkit. Then they said, how do we clean off the rootkit? And I said, I know. I'll just write a little bash script, like 5 lines, that calculates the MD5 hash of every file, and then see which files have changed. That's all it does. This is a really effective solution. Tripwire watches the hash of everything and alerts you if they've changed, if they're in the system folders, which you specify. Something like that would be good. Then you know if somebody's been modifying your files, which is happening a lot. The U.S. hackers at the NSA are hacking people's routers and getting in, and the Russians dumped all those tools called shadow brokers about 5 years ago, and now everybody's doing it. And now the Chinese attackers coming in, according to CNIT, are hacking everybody's routers. And they're hacking routers, firewalls, and VPN concentrators like crazy, and none of those things have any defenses. They got no antivirus, they got nothing. They're the entry point to your network. So this is actually a current sore point. And once that thing is hacked, you're in bad shape, because now all your traffic is going through a compromised device. They can be modifying it. So this is the new hotness, is to hack your router or firewall or VPN concentrator. And I've been saying we need this. We need like integrity control of those devices. What they really ought to have is something like a ROM chip with the right MD5 hash of everything. And every time they boot up, they should make sure nothing has changed. Then how do you update them? I guess mail you a new ROM chip or something would be the real secure solution. But right now, they got nothing. And they get hacked right and left. Anyway, at least by powerful nation-state attackers. I don't think average criminals are doing it yet. But this stuff filters down to the lower level attackers. It won't be long. So make sure let me see if there's comments in the chat. QRadar, yeah, you're talking, oh good. Someone came out of the closet, neat, okay. I'll make a note of this, Zen hacker. Good, all right. Yeah, QRadar is good. From what I hear, I've seen it in action, very powerful, but no easy learning platform. So make sure your monitor is picking up the traffic, can keep up with the flow, and then create signatures that work and check them. So you should have performance metrics to tell you if it's dropping packets. General principles to analyze your traffic once you've got it. Wireshark is excellent. It's the standard. It can unpack almost any protocol. It's easy to follow streams. You can reconstruct audio files. You can do all sorts of good stuff. It's very nice. What you usually do is filter the traffic first to make smaller files to work with. You can use TCP/PO to filter them by protocol or something. And then you can learn to use Wireshark and do queries to get through. There are other tools. Network Investigator is one of them that will sort traffic into various protocols like TCP and UDP and by different addresses and stuff. Just helps you see what's going on. And then you can collect logs. All your network devices have logs, which do not record full packet captures, but they record like IP addresses and errors and such. These are often quite useful. And your IDS sensors might not see the whole attack. They might only see part of it. Your host-based sensors can look at the logs on the host, like a Windows machine, and get information that doesn't come simply directly from the network, and system log files from domain controllers. This is why you use a tool like Splunk, where you gather all the logs from many devices into one central repository, so you can put together all the pieces of an attack, because any one log file often has only a small piece of the picture. And so your server-based logs are looking on the individual system, and the attacker who gains privileges in that system might delete that log file, but they probably can't delete the network-based log file. So that's an issue. That's another reason why you want multiple logs coming in, so that if bad guys are hiding their tracks, it's harder to hide all those tracks. And so you aggregate the logs, and the fundamental problem, which you've certainly seen if you're doing the boss of the SOC, the fundamental problem is the logs are all in different formats. They record different information. Even something simple like an IP address doesn't have a standard name. There's like 5 different names from different sources. And so That's why Splunk is hard. Splunk is a really simple thing to query the logs. The hard part is the structure of the logs themselves. Just like Google. Google's just a search engine. The problem is the web has no structure. So how do you search for pages on a topic when they don't have a place called topic at the top of every web page with the keywords? That would be nice, but they don't. So that's the fundamental problem, is the complexity of the incoming log files. All right, let's try another Kahoot. You don't think your org that can't afford Splunk use, let's see, Security Onion. Yeah, that's right. Use Security Onion. It's free. You can't beat the price. But unless it's changed a lot, you will rapidly discover that it is miserable and you wish you just paid for Splunk. And a lot of people do pay for Splunk. So the companies that have money, if you have money, you learn that the biggest expense on your network is probably the people. And getting a better product that makes your people more efficient is generally worth it. That's why they pay for expensive proprietary solutions. Also, that way it's somebody else's job to patch it and maintain it and update it and all that, right? Most companies are quite happy to pay for a proprietary product as long as it works. I never hear people complain about paying for Microsoft server licenses or anything. That stuff is obviously worth what it costs. And the same thing with Splunk. People do complain about the price of Splunk, but it hasn't stopped any of the Fortune 100 from using it. But I think small and medium businesses use their cheap competitors like Logarithm. I've heard of Graylog. I've seen people promote it. I haven't looked into it a lot. I thought of adding it to the classes. I researched today. I don't know how good it is.
It's one of those free versions kind of.
They seem like good people. I see them at the conventions. They show up at B-Sides and DEF CON trying to get you handing out cards and stuff. So they're with it. They're part of the community. Most of the big corporate people, you never see them. Well, most big corporate people can't go to DEF CON. They feel like they get fired because that would make them like a criminal. So that's if they have a real stodgy square administration, they're like that. Smaller companies are sort of more with it and hip and less concerned with their appearance to clueless administrators, which, as they get bigger and more important, they'll probably have to start, because at some point you have to impress people like Congress. Until recently, people in Congress had no clue about anything. And so you have to consider how a complete idiot will see what you're doing. So just being at DEF CON makes you a criminal. That's the kind of way they think. So it's all what level you're shooting for. I used to be the scruffy guy that with a bad appearance that didn't care. And then I kind of got older and realized, your appearance does matter in certain fields. So being a scruffy, scary hacker does work at a certain level, and then it fails at another level. Oops. Okay. Which one can do intrusion detection or surveillance, but not both at once? That's your IDS. You're either recording traffic or you're filtering it, not both. You typically have two separate devices for those two purposes. All right. Which one uses Lua decoder? Lua is yet another programming language. When I started in the early 70s, there were like 3 or 4 programming languages. We would argue which one was going to win, and then all the rest would go away. And that is not what happened. There's hundreds of them. I can't understand why everybody has to write a new language for everything they're doing, but they totally do. And I knew a web developer who knew so many languages, he got the certification, shrunk down to 3x5, and put them in a Rolodex. Because web developers often know like 20 or 30 languages. It's nuts out there. Anyway.
It's hard to keep up with them all.
And whenever you move from one language to another, you create security holes. Yeah. As the output of this one is misunderstood. But it's like having your staff. One person speaks only Japanese, one person speaks only Chinese, this guy speaks only Arabic, and you wonder why bad things happen, Things happen. Anyway, all right. All right, which one of these will make sure that your OS remains intact? Tripwire's the solution. Like I say, I've been pushing this for a while. It's Hull Security Podcast. I think whoever makes a router with an integrated security system like this can easily charge 50% more for it and make a pile of money. A lot of us would buy that. A lot of companies would buy that. We're beginning to realize how much they need it. Hasn't happened yet, but I think it can't be far in the future for people to sell the secure router with our patented security solution from Cisco or something. Anyway. All right, the top-rated commercial IDPS. Splunk? This must be a statement I got from a textbook, which I didn't agree with. I don't think I agree with that last question. I don't think of it that way. Intrusion detection and prevention system is, in my opinion, not what Splunk is best at. What it is an SIEM. But I have to update this question. I must have written this. I wrote this before I knew much about Splunk. This is probably a statement it says in the book, but I don't think this is a fair statement. Anyway, that's why these are extra credit. They're not 100% fair, in case you haven't noticed. Anyway, a lot of other good reasons too, like you can totally be copying from the person next to you or something. Anyway. All right. Stop this recording.